Have you ever wondered, like, how people find the strength to get through, like, truly awful experiences? Like, what keeps us going when things are just unbelievably tough? It's something I've thought about a lot, especially after reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl's book is born out of his experience in Nazi concentration camps during World War II. Heavy stuff, but what's so incredible is how he manages to find meaning and purpose even in that kind of suffering. And while my own struggles, haven't been anything like that, I think we can all relate to that feeling of facing our own personal camps in life, right? Maybe it's a job loss, a serious illness, a breakup, those moments that just shake you to your core. And reading Frankl's book, it made me realize that it's not about avoiding suffering, because let's face it, that's impossible, but about how we respond to it. It's about finding that thing that keeps us going, that spark of hope, even when things feel hopeless. One of the things Frankl observed was that prisoners went through three distinct psychological phases. And understanding these phases, I think it can help us make sense of our own struggles and maybe even find a way through them. The first phase, and this one might seem obvious, is shock. Frankl describes arriving at Auschwitz, and it's just this brutal assault on the senses. The stripping of possessions, the selection process, the guards who are just completely indifferent to the suffering around them. It's like being thrown into a nightmare. He talks about how prisoners would cling to any scrap of information, trading their meager belongings for anything that might give them a sense of what was to come. It's that desperate need to hold on to something familiar, when everything you thought you knew is gone. Frankl himself lost something incredibly precious during this time, his manuscript. Years of work, his life's passion, just gone. And I can only imagine how devastating that must have been, right? But here's the thing. It also fueled his determination. He vowed to reconstruct it, to not let this experience completely destroy him. And, this idea of shock, it resonates with me on a personal level. I remember this one time I was going through a really rough breakup, and it was like my whole world just imploded. The shock of it, the feeling of being completely lost and disoriented. It was like I was walking around in a daze. But eventually, you start to pick up the pieces, you find a way to adapt, even if it's just one small step at a time. And that's kind of what Frankl is getting at. It's about how we find our footing in the unfamiliar, how we navigate the chaos when everything feels like it's falling apart. But the thing is, the shock doesn't last forever. It eventually gives way to something else, something even more insidious, and that's the second phase, apathy. Frankl describes this chilling numbness that set in after the initial shock wore off. Prisoners would react to beatings with almost robotic detachment, their focus solely on basic survival. They'd retreat into these daydreams about food and warmth, their minds escaping to a place where basic needs were met, even if just for a fleeting moment. And this apathy, it wasn't laziness or weakness, it was actually a defense mechanism, a way to shield themselves from the full weight of that horrific reality. Because if you let yourself feel everything, if you allowed yourself to fully comprehend the horror of your situation, it would be too much to bear. And honestly, I think we've all experienced this kind of apathy in our own lives. Like, I remember this one time I was working on this huge project at work, and it was just all consuming. I was putting in crazy hours, barely sleeping. And after a while, I just hit this wall. It wasn't burnout exactly. It was more like emptiness. I just went through the motions, detached from everything. It was like my mind and body just shut down as a way to protect themselves. And I think that's what Frankl's talking about, apathy. It's a survival tactic, a way to cope when the pain is just too overwhelming. But here's where things get really interesting, because Frankl noticed that not all prisoners succumbed to this apathy. Some found a way to rise above the despair. And that's what led him to his most powerful observation, the third phase, the phase of meaning. And this is where his theory of logotherapy comes in. This is this idea that finding meaning in life, even or maybe especially in suffering, is crucial for survival. Frankl saw prisoners finding meaning in the most unexpected places. Some found it through acts of love and compassion, helping others even when they had nothing themselves. Others found it in creative pursuits, clinging to a shred of beauty or art in the midst of ugliness. And still, others found it by clinging to hope, holding on to the belief that there was a future beyond the barbed wire, a future worth fighting for. He tells this incredibly powerful story about a prisoner who had the chance to escape. Can you imagine, right? After all that, finally, a chance at freedom. But his friend was too sick to escape with him. And this prisoner, he made a choice. He chose to stay, to risk his own life to care for his friend. It's an incredible act of selflessness, and it speaks to the depth of the human spirit, It shows that even in the most dire circumstances, we're capable of extraordinary things. We can choose love over fear, compassion over self-preservation. And this brings up a really big question for all of us, right? What gives our lives meaning? What are those things that drive us forward, that keep us going even when things are tough? Is it our work, our relationships, our passions?
Or is it something deeper, something that connects us to something bigger than ourselves? It's something I think about a lot, and I think Frankl's book offers some really powerful insights into how we can answer that question for ourselves. Because here's the thing, if concentration camp prisoners, people facing unimaginable suffering, could find meaning in their lives, what does that say about the potential of the human spirit? And if they could find meaning in a place like that, then surely we can find it in our own lives, right? Even if our struggles seem small in comparison. Because ultimately, it's not about the scale of our suffering. It's about how we choose to respond to it. It's about finding that spark of meaning, that reason to keep going, even when things feel impossible. And one of the things that really struck me about Frankl's book is how he doesn't just talk about these phases in a theoretical way. He really brings them to life through his own experiences, the details of what he saw and felt in the camps. Like he describes this moment when his transport arrived at Auschwitz. There were all these rumors swirling around, this sense of dread and uncertainty hanging in the air.
Prisoners were desperately trying to get any information they could about what awaited them, grasping at straws. And then the train pulls into the station and the name hits them. Auschwitz. Just that one word. It carried so much weight. It was synonymous with horror, with gas chambers and crematoriums, and unimaginable cruelty. Frankl even talks about how the train seemed to hesitate as it approached the station, like it was trying to delay the inevitable. And you can almost feel the tension, the fear, the crushing weight of that moment, right? And then the dehumanization process began. They were stripped of everything, their possessions, their clothes, even their names. They're reduced to numbers, just cogs in a machine designed to erase their humanity. Frankl, he tried to save his manuscript. This was years of his life's work, his passion, and he pleaded with the guard to keep it safe. And the guard's response, just one word, shit. And in that one word, you see the whole brutal reality of the camps, the complete disregard for human life, the utter indifference to suffering. It was like a slap in the face, a stark reminder that the world as they knew it was gone. They were herded into showers, forced to stand naked and shivering, feeling completely vulnerable and exposed. And it was in these moments, stripped bare of everything, that the true nature of each prisoner was revealed. Some clung to hope, believing against all odds that they would survive. Others sank into despair, giving up on life before it was taken from them. And then there were those who remarkably found ways to hold on to their humanity, to find meaning even in the midst of hell. Frankl talks about this concept he calls the provisional existence of unknown limit. It's this idea that the prisoners had no idea how long their suffering would last. So they had to find a way to live each day as if it might be their last, but also with the hope that it might not be. It's a tough balance, right? Living with that constant uncertainty, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. But Frankl argues that this very uncertainty is what makes life meaningful. Because if we knew exactly what was going to happen, if we knew the exact date of our death, then life would lose its purpose, its sense of urgency. It's like, that old saying, it's not the destination, it's the journey. It's the unexpected twists and turns, the challenges and triumphs along the way that make life worth living. Frankl talks about how even in the camps, people found ways to experience love. Not just romantic love, but love for their fellow human beings. A sense of connection and compassion that transcended the horrors around them. He tells this story about a prisoner who was close to death. This prisoner had a dream about being liberated on March 30th, and he clung to that hope with everything he had. But as the date got closer, his condition worsened, and on March 29th, he died. Now you might think, oh, that's so sad, the dream was wrong, but Frankl saw it differently. He believed that the prisoner died because he lost hope. He gave up on the possibility of a future. And it's a reminder that hope, it's not just some fluffy, feel-good sentiment. It's a powerful force that can literally keep us alive. It gives us something to strive for, something to believe in, even when everything seems hopeless. And when we lose hope, we lose a part of ourselves, a part of what makes us human. And then there's love. Frankl talks about this experience he had while marching to a work site. He was exhausted, despairing, ready to give up. And then he had this vision of his wife. He could see her face, her smile. And he felt this surge of love and connection, even though they were physically separated. And in that moment, he realized that love could survive even the horrors of the camps. He writes, "Love goes very far beyond the physical person of the beloved. It finds its deepest meaning in his spiritual being, his inner self. Whether or not he's actually present, whether or not he's still alive, it all ceases somehow to be of importance." It's pretty profound, right? Even in the darkest of times, love can transcend the physical. It can connect us to something deeper, something more enduring. And then there's the question of suffering. Frankl doesn't shy away from it. He acknowledges that suffering is a part of life, that it's something we all have to face at some point. But he also argues that suffering can be a source of meaning that can lead to growth and transformation. He talks about the challenges of readjusting to life after liberation. Imagine after years of unimaginable hardship finally being free. You'd think it would be pure joy, right? But for many prisoners, it wasn't that simple. He says the liberated prisoners did not grasp the meaning of freedom. They had not learned to use it. They were bewildered and dazed. They were, after all, still in the phase of reaction of the acute mental tension which follows the sudden relief from constant pressure and fear. It's like after years of living in survival mode, freedom can actually be overwhelming. You're suddenly faced with choices, with possibilities. And it can be hard to know where to start, how to rebuild your life. And some former prisoners, they struggled with guilt and shame. They wondered why they had survived when so many others had perished. They felt like they didn't deserve their freedom. And this brings us to Frankl's theory of logotherapy, which is all about finding meaning in life. He writes, man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life and not a secondary rationalization of instinctual drives. This meaning is unique and specific in that it must and can be fulfilled by him alone. Only then does it achieve a significance which will satisfy his own will to meaning. It's like meaning isn't something that's just handed to us. It's something we have to actively seek out, something we create through our choices and actions. And it's different for everyone. What gives meaning to one person's life might be completely different for someone else. Frankl describes 3 ways we could discover meaning in our lives. First, by creating something, by doing meaningful work. Second, by experiencing something, by encountering someone who touches our lives in a profound way. And third, by the attitude we take towards unavoidable suffering. It's like, those times when you go through something really challenging and it changes you for the better. You come out the other side stronger, more resilient, with a new appreciation for the things that truly matter. Suffering can be a catalyst for growth, for transformation. One of the key techniques in logotherapy is what Frankl calls dereflection. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's about shifting your focus away from the problem, away from your own anxieties and worries, and towards something meaningful, something outside of yourself. It's like, when you're feeling anxious about something and you decide to immerse yourself in a hobby or spend time with loved ones. By shifting your attention, you're actually breaking the cycle of overthinking and worry. It might seem counterintuitive, right? But by not focusing on the problem directly, you actually create space for solutions to emerge, for a new perspective to come into view. It's about taking action, engaging with the world rather than getting stuck in your own head. Frankl also talks about the importance of humor even in the darkest of times. He observed that those who could find moments of humor in the camps, who could laugh even in the face of suffering, they actually had a better chance of survival. Humor is like a pressure valve, It allows us to release some of that tension, to gain a bit of perspective on our situation. It reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously even when things are tough. Frankl saw firsthand that even in the most extreme circumstances, people have the capacity for both good and evil. He saw guards who were incredibly cruel, sadistic even, but he also saw guards who showed kindness and compassion, who risked their own lives to help prisoners. And it's a reminder that we're not just products of our environment. We have the power to choose our actions even when facing unimaginable pressure. It's a message of hope and responsibility. We're not just victims of circumstance. We have the power to choose who we want to be, even in the darkest of times. Frankl believed that suffering, while it's definitely not something we seek out, it can actually lead to personal growth and a deeper understanding of life. He said that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. Frankl also observed that a lot of people in modern society, they suffer from a sense of meaninglessness, a feeling of emptiness and lack of purpose. He called this the existential vacuum. And he believed that this existential vacuum, it's not because we lack opportunities or possibilities. It's because we've lost sight of what truly matters. We're so focused on material possessions, on achievement, on external validation, that we forget to cultivate the things that bring true meaning and fulfillment to our lives. And this existential vacuum, it can manifest in a lot of ways. Boredom, depression, anxiety, addiction. These can all be symptoms of a life lacking in meaning. And it's something that I think a lot of people struggle with today, even if they don't realize it. We're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should be doing, what we should be buying, how we should be living our lives. And it's easy to get caught up in that, to lose sight of our own inner compass, our own unique path. Frankl's work is a powerful reminder that meaning isn't something you find out there in the world. It's something you create. It's about choosing to live a life that's in line with your values, your beliefs, your unique purpose. It's about asking yourself, what is my responsibility in this situation? And that's a question we can ask ourselves in any situation, right? Whether it's a personal struggle, a professional challenge, or even a global crisis. It's about finding our own unique way to make a difference, to contribute something meaningful to the world. Frankl believed that love is the highest goal we can aspire to. He saw love as a way to transcend ourselves, to connect with something larger than ourselves. He talks about experiencing this profound sense of connection with his wife while he was imprisoned, even though they were physically separated. And it's a reminder that love can be a powerful force for good, even in the darkest of times. It can give us strength, hope, and a sense of connection that can sustain us through even the toughest challenges. One of the most remarkable stories in the book is about a prisoner who had the chance to escape. Can you imagine, after all that, finally having a chance at freedom? But this prisoner, he chose to stay. Why? Because his friend was too sick to escape with him. Talk about an incredible act of love, right? Putting someone else's needs before your own, even when facing unimaginable danger. It's a reminder that love can inspire us to acts of incredible courage and selflessness. It can motivate us to do things we never thought possible. So, what does all this mean for us today? What can we take away from Frankl's experiences and apply to our own lives? I think the biggest takeaway is that meaning isn't something we find out there in the world. It's something we create. It's about choosing to live a life that aligns with our values, our beliefs, our unique purpose. It's about asking ourselves, what is my responsibility in this situation? What can I do to make a difference, even in the face of suffering? And it's about recognizing that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope. There's always the possibility for meaning and redemption. And that's a powerful message to carry with us no matter what challenges we face. Frankl's book is a call to action. It's a challenge to live our lives with intention, to find what truly gives us meaning, and to never give up hope. Even in the face of unimaginable suffering, the human spirit can endure and even thrive. And that's a truly inspiring message, isn't it?